My name is Alaska, and at 67 years old, I never expected to be judged for my modest lifestyle. After losing James, my husband of 43 years, I continued living simply in our paid-off home, driving my reliable old sedan, and cherishing time with my twin grandchildren. Despite the substantial inheritance, James left me appearances were never important to me. That changed the day my daughter-in-law Stephanie refused to let me babysit because of my car. Standing in her driveway as she took back my house keys, I realized something had to change. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned to see how I turned this heartbreaking moment into a powerful lesson about true worth. I met James when we were both 21, fresh out of college, with big dreams but empty pockets. He was handsome, brilliant with numbers, and had the kindest eyes I had ever seen. We married within a year, promising to build a life of substance rather than show. That philosophy guided our 43 years together. While James became incredibly successful in investment banking, we chose to live modestly in the same 3-bedroom house we bought, as newlyweds drove practical cars and put our money toward experiences and investments rather than status. Symbols. Money in the bank, not on your back, James would always say with a wink. It was more than a catchphrase for us. It was how we lived. We traveled extensively but always flew economy. We ate at 5-star restaurants on special occasions but clipped coupons for our weekly grocery shopping. Our friends often teased us about being secret millionaires, and I suppose in many ways that description was accurate. James passed away 3 years ago after battling pancreatic cancer. Though the loss left an unfillable void in my heart, he made sure I would never worry about money. Working with our longtime financial advisor and friend Barbara, he had carefully structured our investments to provide me with more than enough income for the rest of my life. I continued our modest lifestyle not from necessity but from 4 decades of habit and the comfort of honoring how we had chosen to live together. Our only son Trevor seemed to inherit our values. He worked diligently through medical school, refusing the luxury apartment we offered to help with, instead choosing to live with roommates and work part-time jobs. He specialized in cardiology and by 38 had built a respected practice at Memorial Hospital. I could not have been prouder of the compassionate, hardworking man he had become. Then Trevor met Stephanie at a hospital fundraiser 5 years ago. I still remember how his eyes lit up when he first introduced us. Stephanie was undeniably beautiful with perfect blonde hair, a dazzling smile, and impeccable style. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, which explained her polished appearance and charismatic personality. I was immediately struck by how different she was from Trevor's previous girlfriends, who had mostly been fellow medical professionals with similar values to our family. "Mom, this is Stephanie Trevor," had said, his voice filled with that unmistakable tone of a man in love. "Stephanie, this is my mother, Alaska." Alaska? What an unusual name, Stephanie had replied with a curious smile. "My parents were dreamers," I explained. "They named me after a place they always wanted to visit but never did. I made sure to go there on my 50th birthday to honor them." Stephanie seemed genuinely interested in me that night. She asked thoughtful questions about my life with James, complimented my simple emerald pendant, and even insisted on getting my number to do lunch soon. I left feeling hopeful about this potential daughter-in-law. Their courtship was brief. Within 8 months, Trevor proposed with a diamond ring that I later learned cost more than our first house. The wedding that followed was lavish, held at the city's most exclusive venue with over 300 guests. James would have found it excessive, but I kept that thought to myself, happy to see Trevor so joyful. I tried not to notice how Stephanie seemed disappointed when I wore my 20-year-old formal dress rather than buying something new, or how she rearranged the seating at the reception to place me farther from her college friends. These were small things, I told myself. Adjustments in merging 2 very different families. The first year of their marriage seemed happy. Trevor's practice continued to thrive, and Stephanie transitioned from pharmaceutical sales to running a small boutique public relations firm catering to medical professionals. They purchased a house in Lakewood Heights, an expensive neighborhood across town with massive homes and strict community guidelines. Their mortgage was substantial. I gathered from Trevor's occasional comments about work pressure. Then came the news that changed everything. twins. I still remember Trevor's voice breaking as he told me over the phone that they were expecting not one but two babies. My heart swelled with joy at the prospect of grandchildren. James and I had always hoped for a large family, but complications after Trevor's birth had made that impossible. Now, through my son, that dream of more children in our family would be fulfilled. "We found out yesterday," Trevor had said. "Stephanie is almost 3 months along. They think it's a boy and a girl." "Oh, Trevor," I had cried, tears of happiness streaming down my face. "Your father would have been over the moon." The pregnancy was difficult. Stephanie suffered from severe morning sickness and was placed on bed rest for the final 2 months. I offered to move in temporarily to help, but Stephanie insisted on hiring a professional home health aide instead. I tried not to feel hurt by this rejection, focusing instead on preparing for the babies by knitting blankets and purchasing practical items I knew they would need. Emma and Noah were born 7 weeks early but perfectly healthy. 2 tiny miracles with Trevor's dark hair and curious eyes. The first time I held them in the hospital, I felt James's presence strongly, as if he was standing beside me, admiring his grandchildren. I made silent promises to those babies that day. Promises to love them, support them, and to help them understand the values their grandfather and I had lived by. As the twins grew from newborns to toddlers, I hoped to be a regular presence in their lives. At first, my visits were somewhat restricted. Stephanie had specific ideas about schedules and routines that left little flexibility for spontaneous grandmother time, but when the twins turned 1, an unexpected opportunity arose. The twins' regular daytime nanny quit unexpectedly, and Stephanie was in a bind with several important client meetings scheduled. "Could you possibly watch them on Tuesdays and Thursdays?" she had asked reluctantly. "Just until we find a suitable replacement." I jumped at the chance. Of course, I would love nothing more. Those 2 days a week quickly became the highlight of my existence. I would arrive at 8 in the morning greeted by 2 toddling little ones calling Gamma Gamma. Their little faces lighting up at the sight of me filled a space in my heart that had been empty since James died. I brought homemade baby food, read countless stories, and took them for walks around the neighborhood in their expensive stroller. What began as a temporary arrangement stretched into months, and I dared to hope it might become permanent. Trevor seemed pleased with the arrangement, often commenting on how the twins were learning and thriving under my care. Even Stephanie appeared to appreciate the reliable childcare and the money saved. Yet there were moments when I sensed Stephanie's discomfort with my presence in their carefully curated world. She would make small comments about my vintage clothing or suggest the children might need more modern influences. I brushed these remarks aside, focusing on the joy of being with Emma and Noah. I believed things were settling into a pleasant rhythm. Little did I know that Stephanie's judgment of my modest lifestyle was brewing beneath the surface, ready to erupt in ways that would force me to reconsider everything. 6 months into my babysitting routine, I began noticing subtle changes in how Stephanie interacted with me. What started as occasional comments about my appearance evolved into more direct criticism. One Tuesday morning in April, I arrived at their home wearing my usual comfortable slacks, a simple blouse, and my trusted walking shoes, perfect for chasing active toddlers around the park. Stephanie opened the door and immediately frowned. "Alaska, do you have anything more appropriate to wear when you take the twins out?" I glanced down at my outfit, confused. "What do you mean? These are comfortable and washable, perfect for playing with the kids." She sighed, as if explaining something to a child. "The mothers at the park all dress a certain way. When you take my children out looking like that, it reflects on our family." Like what I asked, genuinely bewildered. "Like you picked your clothes from a thrift store," she said bluntly. "People in this neighborhood have standards." The comment stung more than I wanted to admit. I had always taken pride in being neat and clean, if not fashionable. James had always said I was beautiful in anything I wore. "I see" was all I could manage to say. 2 days later, Stephanie presented me with several shopping bags from expensive boutiques. "I picked these up for you," she said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "For when you're with the twins, the receipts are in the bags if anything doesn't fit." Inside were clothes that cost more than my entire seasonal wardrobe: designer jeans, cashmere sweaters, and leather loafers. The price tags made me wince. "This is very generous, Stephanie, but unnecessary," I said carefully. "I couldn't possibly accept these." Her smile tightened. "I insist." Trevor and I discussed it, and we feel it's important for the children to see their grandmother looking her best. The mention of Trevor's involvement hurt even more. Had my own son been embarrassed by my appearance too? That evening, I called Trevor, hoping to understand what was happening. He sounded distracted and rushed. "Mom, Stephanie means well," he said, between what sounded like patient consultations. "We just want you to feel included in our community." "By changing how I look?" I asked. Trevor sighed. "It's not a big deal, Mom. Just wear the clothes when you're with the kids to make Stephanie happy. I've got to go." The conversation left me feeling hollow. For the first time, I wondered if my place in my grandchildren's lives came with conditions I hadn't anticipated. Nevertheless, I began wearing Stephanie's selected outfits when babysitting, feeling like I was wearing a costume rather than clothes. The twins didn't seem to notice or care what their grandmother wore, but Stephanie nodded approvingly when she saw me in the expensive attire. A few weeks later, Stephanie invited me to a neighborhood barbecue. "The whole community will be there," she explained. "It's a good opportunity for you to meet everyone since you're with the twins so often now." I felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps this was Stephanie's way of truly including me in their lives. I wore one of the outfits she had purchased and spent extra time on my hair and makeup. The barbecue was held in the community park, an immaculately maintained space with a playground that looked more like a modern art installation than equipment for children. Elegant women in designer casual wear clustered in groups, while men in golf attire manned elaborate grilling stations. I stood beside Stephanie as she introduced me to a group of her friends. My smile froze when I heard her words. "This is Alaska, the twins' babysitter," she said smoothly. "Not my mother-in-law or the twins' grandmother, but the babysitter." As if my only value was in the service I provided. One woman looked confused. "But I thought your nanny was named Brianna." "Brianna left us," Stephanie explained. "Alaska fills in 2 days a week until we find someone suitable." Until they found someone suitable. The implication was clear. I was temporary, a stopgap, not really part of the family's permanent picture. I remained quiet throughout the event, playing with Emma and Noah while the adults socialized. Several times I caught Stephanie watching me, with what appeared to be concern whenever I interacted with her friends. That night I cried for the first time since James's funeral. Not loud heaving sobs, but quiet tears of realization that despite my deep love for my grandchildren, I might never truly fit into the world Stephanie was creating for them. The following week brought another small humiliation. I had baked oatmeal cookies from an old family recipe to bring for the twins' snack time. When I arrived and placed them on the counter, Stephanie quickly intercepted them. "Oh, we don't do homemade treats anymore," she said briskly. "Too many unknown ingredients. The twins' nutritionist has them on a special organic gluten-free meal plan." "Nutritionist? They're only 2, I said, surprised. "Precisely why their developing bodies need the best," she replied, replacing my cookies with expensive packaged snacks from a specialty children's food company. Later that day, when Stephanie returned home earlier than expected, I found my container of cookies in the trash. She hadn't even taken them for herself or Trevor. They were simply discarded, like my contribution had no value at all. The final blow in this period came when Trevor's birthday approached. For years, I had hosted a small, intimate dinner for him with his favorite foods. This year, I called to make the usual arrangements. "Actually, Mom," Trevor said awkwardly, "Stephanie has planned a surprise party at Le Bernardine. It's going to be quite an event with colleagues and friends." "Of course," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "What time should I arrive?" There was a pause. "The thing is, it's really a professional networking event, too. Stephanie has invited several hospital administrators and potential investors for my practice. It might be a bit." He hesitated, searching for words. "Boring for me," I supplied. "I was going to say intense," he finished lamely. "How about I come by for lunch the next day, just the 2 of us?" I agreed, but the lunch never happened. Trevor called with an emergency at the hospital, promised to reschedule, and somehow never found the time. Through social media posts that Stephanie tagged Trevor in, I saw photos from the birthday celebration. It looked elegant and exclusive, with Stephanie shining at Trevor's side in a designer dress. I noticed with a pang that Trevor's childhood friend Daniel was there, along with several cousins from my side of the family. Only I had been excluded. It was becoming increasingly clear that Stephanie viewed me not as family but as an embarrassment. Someone to be tolerated for childcare convenience, but kept at arm's length from their real life. And Trevor, my beloved son who had once shared my values, was allowing it to happen. I began to wonder if the joy of being with my grandchildren was worth the steady erosion of my dignity. But every time I considered stepping back, Emma would wrap her small arms around my neck, or Noah would fall asleep on my chest, and I knew I would endure almost anything to remain in their lives. What I didn't realize then was how much more there would be to endure, and how much deeper the wounds would cut before things finally reached a breaking point. As summer transitioned to fall, the subtle dismissals from Stephanie became more overt rejections. My Tuesday and Thursday babysitting schedule, which had been consistent for months, suddenly became subject to last-minute cancellations. "We won't need you tomorrow," Stephanie would text the night before. "Noah has a playdate with the Henderson twins." Or "Emma has a music enrichment class on Thursday. We'll let you know when we need you again." The first few times I accepted the explanations without question. But when this pattern continued for 3 consecutive weeks, I began to worry. Had I done something wrong? Were the children okay? The sporadic nature of my time with Emma and Noah meant I was missing important milestones. Noah learned to say airplane and butterfly. Emma figured out how to put on her own shoes. These precious developments I heard about secondhand, rather than witnessing myself. One Tuesday, when I hadn't been cancelled, I arrived at my usual time to find an unfamiliar luxury SUV in the driveway. A young woman in fashionable athleisure wear was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the twins. "You must be Alaska," she said cheerfully, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Madison, the twins' new nanny. Stephanie told me you might be stopping by to drop something off." The confusion must have shown on my face because Madison's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, did I misunderstand? Stephanie hired me last week for Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays." My heart sank as the realization hit me. I hadn't been cancelled because of playdates or classes. I had been replaced. "There must be some mistake," I managed to say. "I've been watching Emma and Noah on Tuesdays and Thursdays for months." Madison looked uncomfortable. "I'm just following my schedule. Maybe you should talk to Stephanie." At that moment, Stephanie walked in dressed impeccably in a business suit, not a hair out of place despite the early hour. "Alaska, I wasn't expecting you," she said, the surprise in her voice clearly feigned. "Apparently not," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Madison says she's been hired for my days." Stephanie guided me to the front porch away from Madison and the twins. "I was going to call you today. Trevor and I feel the twins need more structure and educational activities than you can provide. Madison has degrees in early childhood education and child psychology. You could have told me directly, instead of having me find out this way," I said, hurt, evident in my voice. "I didn't want to upset you," Stephanie replied, though her tone lacked genuine concern. "You're welcome to visit anytime, of course. Maybe on weekends when Trevor is home." I left that day with a heavy heart, feeling as though I'd been demoted from beloved grandmother to occasional visitor. When I tried calling Trevor that evening, he didn't answer. He returned my call 3 days later, sounding harried. "Mom, I know you're upset, but Madison is really good with the kids. She's teaching them Spanish already." "This isn't about Madison's qualifications," I tried to explain. "It's about how this was handled. You and Stephanie made this decision without even talking to me." Trevor sighed. "Stephanie manages the household and childcare. I trust her judgment on these things." "And what about my relationship with my grandchildren?" I asked. "Nothing's changing there," Trevor insisted. "You can still see them, just on a different schedule." But everything had changed. My regular visits became sporadic drop-ins that always seemed to be scheduled when the twins were napping or about to leave for an activity. Stephanie always had a reason why it wasn't a good time for me to stay long. The distance grew when I was invited to the twins' second birthday party. What I had imagined would be a small family celebration turned out to be an elaborate affair at their home, with a professional event planner, entertainers, and nearly 40 guests, most of whom were Stephanie's friends with their children. I arrived early, hoping to help with preparations, only to be told everything was under control. I presented the twins with handmade quilt blankets I had spent months creating, each stitched with their names and birth date. "How quaint," Stephanie said quickly, setting them aside as more expensive gifts arrived from other guests. During the party, I found myself relegated to the periphery. When family photos were taken, Stephanie's parents were prominently positioned beside the twins, while I was asked to step aside. "We'll do another set with you after," Stephanie promised, but somehow that moment never came. The most painful part was realizing that Emma and Noah, who had once rushed into my arms with excitement, now seemed uncertain around me. After just a few months of limited contact, I had become unfamiliar to them. When I tried to hug Noah, he buried his face in Madison's legs instead of mine. "He's just going through a clingy phase," Madison explained kindly, though we both knew the truth. I had been replaced in my grandchildren's affections because I had been replaced in their lives. That night I learned something that cut even deeper. While helping clear dessert plates in the kitchen, I overheard Stephanie talking to a friend near the pantry. "It's challenging dealing with Trevor's mother," she was saying in a hushed tone. "She means well, but she comes from such a different background. Growing up poor really shaped her worldview." "Poor Alaska?" her friend questioned. "Oh yes," Stephanie continued. "She and Trevor's father lived so frugally. You can see it in how she presents herself, how uncomfortable she is in nice settings like this. I try to include her, but it's hard when she so clearly doesn't fit with the life we're building." I stood frozen, plates in hand, as Stephanie continued to paint me as some sort of charity case that she magnanimously tolerated for Trevor's sake. Not only was she excluding me from my grandchildren's lives, but she was also fabricating a narrative about my background that justified that exclusion. James and I had never been poor. We had chosen simplicity and financial security over displays of wealth. That choice, which had served us well through market crashes and economic downturns, was now being weaponized against me as evidence of my unworthiness. I left the party early, claiming a headache. Neither Stephanie nor Trevor seemed particularly concerned by my departure. The weeks that followed brought more distance. Thanksgiving plans were made without me, with Stephanie deciding they would spend the holiday with her family in Connecticut instead. Christmas involved a brief, awkward gift exchange on December 23rd before they left for a winter vacation at a ski resort. With each passing month, I felt myself being erased from my grandchildren's lives. What hurt most was Trevor's complicity in this erasure. My son, who had once shared holiday traditions and Sunday dinners with me, now rarely called and visited, even less. When I finally managed to arrange a lunch with just him, I tried to express my feelings. "I feel like I'm losing my connection with Emma and Noah," I said carefully. "And with you." Trevor looked uncomfortable. "Mom, you're exaggerating. We're just busy building our lives. Stephanie has certain standards for how we raise the kids and who they spend time with." "And I don't meet those standards?" I asked directly. Trevor wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's not that. It's just. Stephanie feels the children need to be surrounded by certain types of influences. People who can model the lifestyle and values we want them to have." His words confirmed what I had suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe. In Stephanie's eyes, and increasingly in Trevor's, I wasn't good enough for my own grandchildren because I drove an older car, lived in a modest home, and didn't spend extravagantly on appearances. I returned home that day, and for the first time seriously considered what James would advise me to do in this situation. He had always valued dignity and self-respect alongside family connection. Would he want me to continue subjecting myself to this treatment just to maintain a tenuous link to our grandchildren? I had no answer yet, but I was beginning to realize that something would eventually have to give. I just didn't expect it to happen quite so dramatically, or so soon. 3 days after my lunch with Trevor, I received an unexpected call from Stephanie. Her voice had none of its usual composed superiority. Instead, she sounded frantic. "Alaska, I need your help," she said without preamble. "Trevor had to fly to Chicago for an emergency consultation with a patient there. Madison has some kind of stomach virus, and I have 3 critical client meetings today that I absolutely cannot reschedule. I kept my voice neutral despite the surge of hope I felt. You need me to watch the twins. Yes, she admitted. Just for today from noon until around 6. I've already fed them lunch and they'll nap from 1 to 3 usually. There's dinner in the refrigerator they can have at 5. I'll be there, I said, simply already gathering my purse and keys. Thank you, Stephanie, said sounding genuinely relieved. I owe you one. As I backed my 12-year-old sedan out of the garage, I felt a mixture of emotions. Joy, at the prospect of spending time with Emma and Noah. Sadness that it took an emergency for me to be included. And a quiet determination to make the most of this opportunity to reconnect with my grandchildren. I arrived at their house, at precisely noon, parking in the circular driveway behind Stephanie's gleaming new luxury SUV. She opened the door before I could ring the bell, already dressed in a sleek designer suit with her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. The kids are in the playroom, she said hurriedly. Emergency numbers are on the fridge. Madison usually takes them to the park around 4 if they've been good after their nap. We'll be fine, I assured her. Go handle your meetings. Stephanie was halfway to her car when she turned and looked at mine for the first time. Her expression shifted from hurried to horrified. Is that what you drove here? She asked, staring at my sedan, as if it were covered in mud rather than freshly washed. Yes, the same car I've had for 12 years, I replied, confused by her reaction. It's extremely reliable. Stephanie stalked back toward me, lowering her voice even though we were alone in the driveway. You can't possibly think I'm going to let you drive my children around in that death trap. Death trap, I echoed, bewildered. Stephanie, my car is regularly serviced and in excellent condition. I've never even had a fender bender. It's ancient, she hissed. What would the neighbors think if they saw my children being driven around in that? What if someone from Trevor's hospital saw you? I stood there speechless, as Stephanie continued her tirade. This is exactly what I've been trying to explain to Trevor, she said, gesturing wildly at my car. You don't understand the image we need to maintain. Our social standing matters. The twins' future connections matter. They're 2 years old, I said quietly. They don't care what car they ride in, as long as they're safe and loved. Stephanie's face flushed with anger. This isn't just about the car, it's about everything it represents, your whole lifestyle. She practically spat the last word. I tried to remain calm. Stephanie, you called me because you needed help. I'm here to provide that help. The children won't be harmed by spending an afternoon with their grandmother. That's when she said the words, I will never forget. You can't babysit in that old car, she stated flatly. What if my neighbors see you look too poor to be related to us? Her voice turned cruel as she delivered the final blow. I can't trust my children with someone who can't even afford a decent car. I stood frozen, the weight of her contempt nearly buckling my knees. In that moment I heard Trevor's voice and realized Stephanie had him on speakerphone throughout this confrontation. Steph, the kids will be fine with Mom for one afternoon, Trevor said, his tone placating. We don't have another option right now. His words meant to diffuse the situation only wounded me further. He hadn't defended me, hadn't objected to Stephanie's characterization of me as too poor, too shabby to be associated with their family. He was merely arguing that they had no choice today. Stephanie glared at her phone. We do have a choice. I'll cancel my smallest client meeting and work from home. But the Withdrew account, Trevor began, is less important than making sure our children aren't seen being driven around in something from the last century, Stephanie snapped. Then she turned to me, her hand extended. I'll need the house keys back. Excuse me, I managed to say. The house keys I gave you for emergencies, she clarified. Since it's clear you won't be watching the twins anymore, I'll need them back. With trembling fingers, I removed her house key from my keyring and placed it in her palm. I was vaguely aware of a neighbor walking her dog across the street, watching our confrontation with poorly disguised interest. I'm sorry you feel this way, I said quietly, fighting to maintain my composure. I'm sorry too, Stephanie replied, though her tone conveyed no regret. Sorry that you can't seem to understand what's appropriate. This is why Madison is worth every penny of her salary." She turned and walked back into the house, closing the door firmly behind her, leaving me standing alone in the driveway beside my suddenly shameful car. The drive home passed in a blur of tears and disbelief. Never in my 67 years had I been spoken to with such naked disdain. Never had I been made to feel so worthless based on material possessions. And never had I imagined my own son would silently allow such treatment of his mother. As I pulled into my garage, I couldn't help but see my home and possessions through Stephanie's judgmental eyes. The tidy but modest house where Trevor had grown up. The comfortable but aging furniture. The garden I tended myself rather than hiring landscapers. All evidence in her mind that I was unworthy of a place in my grandchildren's lives. But beneath the hurt and humiliation, something else was stirring. A realization that had been building for months now, crystallized by Stephanie's cruelty. This wasn't about a car or clothes or appearances. This was about power and values. And perhaps it was time I clarified both for my daughter-in-law. The morning after what I had come to think of as the driveway incident, I woke early after a restless night. My eyes were swollen from tears, but my mind was unexpectedly clear. I made coffee and sat in my sunroom, watching the first light illuminate the garden James and I had planted together decades ago. The phone rang around 10, breaking the contemplative silence. It was Barbara, my financial advisor, and one of my oldest friends. "Just checking if we're still on for lunch," she said cheerfully. "I have those portfolio updates you wanted to review." I had completely forgotten our standing lunch date, but suddenly it seemed providential. "Yes, absolutely. In fact, I have some important things I'd like to discuss with you." We met at our usual cafe, a small woman-owned place that served extraordinary quiche and didn't mind patrons lingering over coffee. Barbara arrived with her characteristic efficiency portfolio folder in one hand, reading glasses perched on her head. One look at my face told her something was wrong. "Alaska, what happened? You look like you've been through the ringer." The story poured out of me then, all of it. The gradual exclusion from my grandchildren's lives, Stephanie's increasing judgment of my lifestyle. The final humiliation in the driveway. "She took back my house key, Barbara." I concluded, my voice breaking slightly. Like I was a dismissed employee rather than family. Barbara, never one to mince words, looked outraged. "That entitled little snob," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "And Trevor just let this happen." He tried to argue that they needed my help for the afternoon, but he never defended me against what she was saying, never contradicted her judgment of me. Barbara shook her head, her expression softening. "How are you holding up?" "Honestly, I'm devastated about losing access to Emma and Noah. But I'm also angry, not just at Stephanie, but at myself for allowing this situation to continue so long. For letting my fear of losing my grandchildren override my self-respect. What are you thinking of doing?" "That's where I need your help," I replied. "I want to know exactly where I stand financially. No generalizations. I need specific numbers." Barbara raised an eyebrow but opened her folder. "You've never been particularly interested in the details before. James always said you were a big-picture person when it came to money." "Things change," I said simply. For the next hour, Barbara walked me through my financial situation in detail. The substantial investment portfolio James had built, the life insurance proceeds, the pension and Social Security income, the minimal withdrawals I had been making living well below my means, which had allowed the principal to grow significantly. Bottom line, Barbara concluded, "You're worth over $4 million, Alaska. You could buy a new luxury car every year for the rest of your life and barely dent the principal, especially with the way we have things invested." I sat back processing this information. Of course, I had always known James left me well provided for, but hearing the specific figures was still somewhat startling. "Stephanie has no idea," I said quietly. "She truly believes I live this way because I have to. And you've never corrected that assumption." I shook my head. "James and I never discussed our finances with others, including Trevor. We taught him values, not net worth. We wanted him to appreciate hard work and simplicity because they were virtues, not because of our bank balance." Noble intentions, Barbara noted, but it seems to have backfired with your daughter-in-law. It has, I agreed. And now I need to decide what to do about it. We sat in silence for a moment before Barbara asked, "What do you want, Alaska? Not what would James have wanted or what Trevor might want. What do you want, at this point in your life?" The question caught me off guard. I had spent so many years considering James's preferences, then focusing on Trevor's needs, and lately trying to maintain a relationship with my grandchildren at any cost. What did I want for myself? "I want my dignity back," I said finally. "I want to see my grandchildren grow up, and I want my son to remember the values his father and I raised him with." Do you think those things are mutually exclusive? They might be the way things stand now. Barbara leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "You know, Alaska, there's something to be said for speaking to people in the language they understand. Stephanie clearly values external markers of wealth and status. Perhaps it's time to translate your actual worth into terms she can comprehend." "You think I should start flaunting money to impress my daughter-in-law?" I asked skeptically. "Not to impress her," Barbara clarified. "To command her respect. To shift the power dynamic that's currently allowing her to marginalize you. Sometimes, you need to use the tools at hand to create the opportunity for deeper change." After lunch, I drove home with much to consider. Barbara's suggestion kept replaying in my mind. Could I use my financial position to create an opening for reconciliation? Or would that just reinforce Stephanie's materialistic values? I spent the next several days in deep reflection, alternating between periods of uncertainty and moments of surprising clarity. I found myself walking through rooms of my house, touching objects that held memories of my life with James. In our home office, I opened his desk drawer and found the letter he had written me before his death, his final advice shared with his characteristic wisdom and humor. "Remember, my dear Alaska, he had written money is just a tool. Like any tool, its value lies in how you use it. We've been fortunate to have more than we needed, which gave us the freedom to live by choice rather than necessity. Use that freedom well in the years ahead." Freedom to live by choice. That phrase resonated deeply as I considered my options. On the 5th day after the driveway incident, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my attorney to discuss certain financial arrangements. The second was to a local car dealership. The third was to a personal shopper recommended by Barbara, something I had never imagined doing in my life. The following week was a flurry of activity as I implemented the plan that had crystallized during my reflection. With each step, I felt a growing sense of empowerment, replacing the hurt and helplessness of recent months. Some might have viewed my actions as petty revenge, but in my heart, I knew they were something more important, a reclamation of my self-worth and an opportunity to deliver a valuable lesson that words alone had failed to convey. By the time I was ready to confront Stephanie and Trevor, I felt a calm resolve that had been missing from my life since James's death. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the dignity and strength that had sustained me through 67 years of life's ups and downs. 2 weeks after the driveway incident, I pulled into Trevor and Stephanie's neighborhood in my brand new Tesla Model S. The sleek electric car was far from the most expensive vehicle I could have purchased, but it represented a deliberate choice. Environmentally conscious, yet undeniably prestigious, it made a statement without being ostentatious. I had timed my arrival carefully 5:30 in the evening, when I knew many neighbors would be returning from work. Sure enough, several people were outside collecting mail or walking dogs as I drove slowly down the street. My appearance had changed as well. Gone was my practical, comfortable wardrobe, replaced by a carefully curated selection of designer clothing that the personal shopper assured me conveyed understated wealth. Today, I wore tailored slacks, a cashmere sweater, and simple but elegant jewelry, including the diamond earrings James had given me on our 40th anniversary, normally reserved for special occasions. I parked directly in front of Trevor and Stephanie's house, noting with satisfaction how a neighbor across the street did a double take, clearly recognizing me but confused by my transformed appearance and vehicle. With a leather portfolio under my arm, I walked confidently to the front door and rang the bell. Through the decorative glass panels, I could see Stephanie approaching. Her expression shifted from annoyance to surprise as she opened the door. "Alaska," she said, taking in my appearance with obvious confusion. Her eyes darted past me to the Tesla parked at the curb. "What are you doing here? And whose car is that?" "Mine," I replied simply. "May I come in? I have something important to discuss with you and Trevor." Too surprised to object, Stephanie stepped aside. From the kitchen I could hear the twins' voices mixed with what sounded like Madison trying to organize dinner. "Trevor isn't home yet," Stephanie said, regaining some of her composure. "He's running late at the hospital." "That's fine. I can wait," I said, seating myself comfortably on their living room sofa without being invited. "I've taken the liberty of asking him to come home as soon as possible. He should be here shortly." "You did what?" Stephanie's voice rose slightly. "We had plans tonight. The Andersons invited us for dinner at 7. "This won't take long," I assured her. "But it is necessary." Stephanie looked increasingly uncomfortable, glancing between me and the Tesla visible through their front window. "Did something happen? Why are you dressed like that? And that car?" "All part of what we need to discuss," I said calmly. We sat in awkward silence until Trevor's car pulled into the driveway 20 minutes later. He entered looking concerned, his tie loosened after a long day. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Your text sounded urgent," he said, then stopped short as he took in my appearance. "You look different." "Hello, Trevor. Thank you for coming home. Please sit down, both of you." Something in my tone must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation, because they both complied without further questions, sitting together on the sofa opposite me. "First, I want to thank you for inviting me into your home today," I began formally. "Given our last interaction, I wasn't sure I would be welcome." Trevor had the grace to look embarrassed, but Stephanie maintained her composed facade, though I could sense her curiosity about my transformed appearance. "I've had some time to reflect on our relationship over the past year," I continued, "particularly on the values that seem to shape your household decisions. After considerable thought, I've decided to make some changes that I believe will clarify things for all of us." I opened the leather portfolio and removed several documents, placing them on the coffee table between us. "These papers represent the payoff of your mortgage on this house," I said directly. "As of 9 o'clock this morning, the loan has been fully satisfied. The bank will send official confirmation within the week." The silence that followed was absolute. Trevor stared at the documents, then at me, his expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and shock. Stephanie's perfectly composed facade cracked completely, her mouth literally falling open. "That's not possible," she finally managed to say. "Our mortgage is nearly $800,000. $873,422.16, to be precise," I corrected, "plus a prepayment penalty of $12,000, which I also covered." Trevor found his voice. "Mom, what have you done? Where did you get that kind of money?" "From my investment portfolio," I replied simply. "The one your father established and grew over 43 years of disciplined saving and intelligent investing. The one that's been managed by Barbara since his death, continuing to grow because I chose to live below my means." I turned my attention directly to Stephanie. "You see, my dear, contrary to what you've been telling your friends, I never grew up poor. James and I made deliberate choices about how we lived and what we valued. Choices that have left me with considerable wealth that I've had no reason to flaunt until now." Stephanie's face flushed deep red. "I never said." "Please don't," I interrupted gently. "We both know what you've said about me and my background. The difference is now your neighbors will have something new to talk about when they see my Tesla parked in your driveway." Trevor leaned forward, still struggling to process what was happening. "Mom, we can't accept this. It's too much. We can manage our mortgage." "Can you? Is that why you've been working 60-hour weeks? Why you missed our lunch date last month because of an emergency? With a patient who, as I later learned from Barbara's husband who works at the same hospital, was actually a mortgage refinance meeting." Trevor had the decency to look ashamed. "The money isn't the point, Trevor," I continued more softly. "It's what it represents. For months I've been judged and gradually excluded from your lives because I was perceived as lacking financial status. Stephanie made it abundantly clear that my car, my clothes, my entire lifestyle made me an embarrassment to your family. I turned back to Stephanie. 2 weeks ago, you told me I looked too poor to be related to you. You took back my house key and dismissed me from my grandchildren's lives because you couldn't bear the thought of your neighbors seeing them in my car. I was upset that day, Stephanie protested weakly. I didn't mean. I think you did, I countered. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm not looking for an apology or trying to make you feel guilty. I simply want to be clear about where we stand going forward. I reached into my portfolio again and removed a small envelope, placing it beside the mortgage documents. This contains the house key you asked me to return. I won't be needing it anymore. What does that mean? Trevor asked, alarm evident in his voice. It means I won't be available for emergency childcare or last-minute babysitting. It means I won't subject myself to judgment about my worth based on material possessions. It means I've decided to value myself, even if others don't. But the kids, Trevor began. The twins are wonderful, and I love them dearly. I said, my voice softening. But I've come to realize that maintaining a healthy relationship with them requires a healthy relationship with their parents first. That's not something I can purchase even with my considerable resources. I stood up, gathering my portfolio. The mortgage is paid in full, no strings attached. What you choose to do with the financial freedom that provides is entirely up to you. My hope is that it might create space for reflection on what truly matters in life. As I moved toward the door, Trevor stood too. Mom, wait. We need to talk about this. We do, I agreed. But not today. Today was about clarity, about making sure we all understand the reality of our situation rather than the assumptions that have shaped our interactions. I'm happy to have a longer conversation when you're ready. Stephanie remained seated, staring at the mortgage documents as if they might vanish if she looked away. One last thing, I said from the doorway. James and I taught you that money is a tool, Trevor, not a measure of a person's worth. That lesson seems to have gotten lost somewhere along the way. Perhaps now is a good time to rediscover it. With that, I walked out to my Tesla, aware of curious neighbors pretending not to watch. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Trevor, standing in the doorway. His expression, a complex mixture of confusion, shame, and something that might have been the beginning of understanding. The weeks following my dramatic exit from Trevor and Stephanie's house were surprisingly peaceful. I had expected to feel anxious or second-guess my decision, but instead, I experienced a sense of liberation I hadn't felt since before James's illness. I used this newfound freedom to reconnect with old friends, join a community garden project, and even take a watercolor painting class I had been curious about for years. With each activity, I felt myself reclaiming parts of my identity that had been overshadowed by the struggle to maintain a place in my grandchildren's lives. 3 weeks after what Barbara teasingly called my grand gesture, Trevor showed up at my door on a Sunday afternoon. He stood on my porch, looking uncertain, more like the little boy who had broken a neighbor's window with his baseball than the confident surgeon he had become. "Can we talk, Mom?" he asked simply. I invited him in and made coffee, noticing how his eyes took in my familiar, comfortable living room with a new awareness. The same furniture, photographs, and modest decorations that had always been there now viewed through a lens altered by the revelation of my financial status. "You've been busy," he commented, gesturing toward my half-finished watercolor on an easel by the window. "I have," I agreed. "It's been refreshing to explore new interests." We sat in my sunroom, autumn light filtering through the windows, the garden James had loved visible beyond. "I owe you an apology," Trevor began without preamble. "Several, actually." "I'm listening," I said, neither accepting nor dismissing the apology before hearing it. Trevor set his coffee down and met my eyes directly. "I let Stephanie dictate the terms of your relationship with us and the twins. I stood by while she gradually pushed you out of our lives. I heard her say unforgivable things to you, and I didn't defend you. For all of that, I am deeply sorry." The sincerity in his voice touched me. "Thank you for acknowledging that." "There's more," he continued. "I lost sight of the values you and Dad taught me. Somewhere along the way, I started measuring success by the size of our house, the prestige of our address, the exclusivity of the schools we might send the twins to. I got caught up in appearances in a way that would have disappointed Dad terribly. I reached across and took his hand. Your father was proud of your accomplishments, Trevor. But yes, he would have been concerned about some of your recent priorities. The mortgage thing, Trevor said, shaking his head slightly. I still can't believe you did that. Was it effective? I asked with a small smile. Extremely, he admitted. Stephanie hasn't been the same since. Neither have I, honestly. How so? Trevor ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father, it made my heart ache momentarily. It forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths. About our spending habits. About the pressure we've put on ourselves to maintain a certain lifestyle. About the values we're modeling for Emma and Noah. And what conclusions have you reached? We're making changes, Trevor said. I've reduced my hours at the hospital. We've put Madison on a part-time schedule. I've been taking the kids to the park myself on my days off. It's been enlightening to see how little they care about designer clothes or what car they ride in. They just want attention and love. Children have a way of clarifying what matters, I observed. They do, Trevor agreed. And speaking of the twins, they miss you. They ask about Gamma almost every day. The mention of Emma and Noah brought both joy and caution. I miss them too. But I meant what I said about needing a healthy relationship with their parents first. Trevor nodded. I understand. And I want to rebuild that relationship, Mom. On better terms, more honest terms. And Stephanie, I asked the question that couldn't be avoided. Trevor sighed. She's struggling but trying. Your revelation shook her self-image pretty profoundly. Finding out that the woman she had dismissed as poor could casually pay off our mortgage forced her to question a lot of her assumptions. That was part of the intent, I admitted. She wants to talk to you too, but she's embarrassed. Ashamed, really. She asked me to see if you'd be willing to meet with her. I considered this request carefully. I'm open to that conversation when she's ready, not to rehash the past, but to establish a new understanding going forward. Trevor visibly relaxed. Thank you. That means a lot. We talked for another hour more openly than we had in years, about James and the values he had lived by, about Trevor's practice, and his genuine passion for medicine that had gotten obscured by financial pressures, about the twins' developing personalities and interests. As he prepared to leave, Trevor hesitated at the door. Mom, about the mortgage. We want to set up a repayment plan. I know you said no strings attached, but it doesn't feel right to accept such a massive gift. I touched his cheek gently. The money was never the point, Trevor. It was about challenging perceptions and reclaiming my dignity. But if repaying it would make you feel better, we can discuss terms that won't strain your new work-life balance. Deal, he said, hugging me tightly before leaving. The conversation with Stephanie happened a week later over lunch at a neutral restaurant of my choosing. Gone was the perfectly polished woman who had looked down on me for months. In her place sat someone more subdued, less certain of herself. I don't know how to begin apologizing for the things I said to you, she started after we ordered. They were cruel and untrue and completely inexcusable. Yes, they were. I agreed, neither harsh nor particularly forgiving yet. What I'd like to understand is why. Why was it so important to judge me based on my car or clothes or lifestyle? Stephanie looked down at her hands. I grew up in a family that struggled financially, she admitted quietly. My parents fought constantly about money. We were evicted twice before I was 10. When I got older, I promised myself I would never live that way again. Somewhere along the line, that promise twisted into needing to surround myself with visible proof that I had escaped that life. Her honesty surprised me. And you saw my lifestyle as a threat to the security you had built. I think I was afraid, she acknowledged. Afraid that your influence might somehow pull us back toward financial insecurity. It makes no sense now that I know the truth, but fear rarely does make sense. No, it doesn't, I agreed. Alaska, Stephanie said, using my name with genuine respect for perhaps the first time, I am truly sorry for how I treated you. For the things I said. For trying to keep you from Emma and Noah. None of it was fair or right. I studied her face, seeing vulnerability where there had once been only judgment. Thank you for that apology. I accept it with the understanding that we need to build something new going forward, not just paper over the past. I want that too, she said earnestly. The twins need their grandmother. Trevor needs his mother. And I think I need the wisdom you can offer about what truly matters in building a family. Over the months that followed, we slowly established a new normal. I began visiting the twins regularly again, though I maintained clearer boundaries about my availability and expectations. Trevor reduced his work hours, further prioritizing family dinners and weekend activities. Stephanie, in perhaps the most surprising development, started volunteering at a financial literacy program for women leaving abusive relationships, finding purpose in helping others achieve the security she had so desperately craved. The mortgage payment became a structured loan with reasonable terms, preserving both their financial responsibility and my dignity as something other than their benefactor. The money that Trevor saved from reduced mortgage payments went partially into college funds for the twins and partially toward family experiences rather than material possessions. As for me, I embraced this new chapter of my life with enthusiasm. I continued my watercolor classes, joined a book club, and even started mentoring young women in financial independence through Barbara's firm. I traveled to places James and I had always planned to visit together, finding bittersweet joy in fulfilling those shared dreams. Most meaningfully, I established a small foundation focused on supporting grandparents, struggling to maintain relationships with grandchildren during family conflicts. The Bridging Generations Foundation became my passion project, transforming my personal pain into purpose for others facing similar situations. 1 year after the driveway confrontation, we gathered at my house for a family dinner. As I watched Emma and Noah playing in the garden, James had planted Trevor grilling on the patio, and Stephanie setting the table with my everyday dishes, without a hint of judgment, I felt a profound sense of peace. Later, as the twins slept in the guest room that had once been Trevor's childhood bedroom, the 3 adults sat on my back porch with glasses of wine. I was thinking about Dad today, Trevor said reflectively, about what he would make of everything that's happened. He would have been appalled by my Tesla purchase, I laughed. Such an extravagance. But proud of why you did it, Trevor countered, standing up for yourself while teaching a valuable lesson. That was very much his style. I've been meaning to ask, Stephanie said hesitantly. Why did you and James choose to live so modestly when you clearly could have afforded more? I considered the question, appreciating that it came from genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Freedom, I said finally. Living below our means gave us the freedom to make choices based on values, rather than financial necessity. The freedom to help others without public recognition. The freedom to walk away from situations that compromised our integrity. I looked at them both meaningfully. And the freedom to make dramatic gestures when necessary to protect what matters most. Stephanie smiled ruefully. Message received loud and clear. As they prepared to leave loading sleeping twins into car seats, I found myself reflecting on the journey we had taken together. From judgment to understanding, from exclusion to belonging, from valuing possessions to valuing presence. The lesson had been costly in many ways, but ultimately worth every penny for the truth. It revealed that our worth cannot be measured by the cars we drive or the clothes we wear, but by the love we give and the values we uphold. Have you ever had to teach someone an unexpected lesson about your true worth? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of standing up for yourself resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need a reminder of their own value beyond material possessions. Thank you for listening, and remember, true wealth is measured not by what you have, but by knowing who you are.